Greetings, and welcome to my channel. I'm the Anunnaki Theorist. In my last video, I talked about the weapons of the Anunnaki. Everything from the possible weapons of the ground soldiers all the way up to three of the core Anunnaki and their signature weapons and how they carried over into their different personas. Now, for those that watched the video until the very end, they get a little bit of a preview for what this video is about. This is the weapons of terror. Now, the end of that video, and then of course the beginning of this video, yes, we are talking about nuclear weapons. Now, these nuclear devices are, well, they're different than what we would see as a nuclear device. Yes, they still used a fissile material, they still gave off radiation, and of course we'll get into that. But they were designed for a specific purpose. And like I said, I'll get into that. Okay, so when we get into the Lost Book of Enki, and this is at the very beginning, right after the attestation of Endemsar. This is what is known as Enki's Lament. Now, this wasn't something that Zecharia Sitchin just, pulled out of thin air. This actually comes from a collection of cuneiform clay tablets that have been found all over Mesopotamia, in the ruins, of course. Supposedly written, or at least dictated by the god of whatever city that the tablet was found in. These are the lamentations of the gods. And in every one of them, they talk about some sort of a great calamity that took place that did a lot of damage to the cities of Mesopotamia. And from what it sounds in these texts, the gods, they're lamenting, they're feeling sorry for, they're regretting something that they caused, something that they did had an unintended consequence. And that was what this great calamity was. Okay, so here in the Lost Book of Enki it says, an evil wind, a storm born in a distant plain, a great calamity wrought in its path. A death-dealing wind, born in the west, its way to the east has made, its course set by fate. A storm devouring as the deluge, by wind and not by water a destroyer, by poisoned air, not tidal waves overwhelming. By fate, not destiny, was it engendered. The great gods in their council the great calamity had caused. Okay. So something they did, and I'll get into that, that had an unintended consequence. Now, this is something that we know. But I'm thinking that even though the Anunnaki were very intelligent, they were smart, they should have been able to know this, because they weren't exactly used to, the air currents and things like that of Earth. They weren't expecting something like this to happen, or, and I think this is the more than likely, when these weapons of terror were used, technically there was only 2 targets that were authorized to be hit. But it wound up being a total of 7 targets that were hit. Okay, and I'll get into that. Okay, so what is this great calamity? It says, a death-dealing wind born in the west, its way to the east has made. By wind, not by water, a destroyer, poisoned air. Okay, so when we get into the use of nuclear weapons, one of the big concerns is nuclear fallout. Okay, so before I go into this, we have 3 with the potential of a 4th type of nuclear detonation. And this is basically where it's detonated. The first, and probably the most concerning for us today, is the airburst detonation. Now, the airburst won't do as much collateral damage. Yeah, you're still going to get the fireball in the sky. You're still going to get the shock wave. But the main concern with an airburst detonation is the EMP, the electromagnetic pulse. If you are wanting to take out a city, fine, just drop the bomb or the missile or whatever on the city. Do what's known as a ground burst. But if you're wanting to cripple a country, no, you want to do an airburst over a major hub of the electrical grid. Now, it was over 20 years ago. It was like right at the border of the United States and Canada. There was something that happened to one of the main power stations, main substations, that connected a lot of the power grid. And it went down. And you had tens of thousands, if not millions of people were without power for a long time. Now, that was over 20 years ago. Think about how reliant we are on electricity today. How much havoc that would cause. And especially if you did it at the worst times of the year, which would be your extreme temperatures. You know, either in the summer or worse yet, in the winter. So, being without power, yeah, that would cripple a nation. So the airburst is the thing that we are the most worried about. Okay? But airburst isn't going to give you nuclear fallout. The second type of detonation is the ground burst. Nuclear weapons have only been used as weapons twice in modern man's history. And that was Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II. These bombs were dropped on the city. Now, when it comes to the yield of these things, these were only in the kiloton range. The nuclear weapons that we have today are in the megaton range. Okay, so these 2 atomic bombs, they were enough to destroy pretty much an entire city. Each one. And that was only kilotons. A megaton detonation would destroy a large city, its suburbs, and probably the surrounding farmland around it. And so, yes, it would do a lot of damage, but that's not going to cripple a nation. This is where you do the airburst. But the problem with doing a ground burst is you get the fallout. Now, what that is when you have a ground burst, you have the huge fireball, you have the blast wave. It does still generate an EMP, so it is going to knock out electricity. Although the amount of devastation that's going to be done, it ain't going to matter. But what happens is this blast wave, it sends particulates up into the atmosphere. Well, it sends particulates, dust, and debris. Sorry about that. So the larger debris will actually come down pretty much right away. But the small particulates and the dust will actually go up into the atmosphere, mix with the clouds, and then won't come back down right away. Will move with the air currents. Now, when we read that there in the Lost Book of Enki, it said, born in the west, its way to the east has made. Well, that's the way the jet stream moves. It moves from west to east. So this detonation would have been done in a place or places in the west, and then would have, because of the air currents, would have moved east. Okay, so like I said, it mixes with the clouds, and you get, you can either get the particulates themselves that fall back down, and every one of these particles, every one of these little dust motes, is irradiated. That's nasty. I mean, if one of these little dust particles falls on you, you're automatically irradiated. Okay, and then even worse is when it mixes with the clouds and it becomes black rain. Okay, so that is what they're talking about when they're talking about this poisoned wind. They're talking about this nuclear fallout that came back down. Okay, the third type of nuclear device detonation is the underground detonation. You're not necessarily going to get fallout from that. If it's, as long as it's done far enough underground, you won't have it explode up out of the ground. This is the way a lot of nuclear weapons are being tested today. Now, several countries have created treaties that state that they won't do any more nuclear testing. For one, they've done enough. They know the outcomes. They have all the contingencies and so on and so forth. But those are the countries that already have nuclear weapons. There are a few countries out there that don't have them that would love to have them. And so they do nuclear testing. Now, they won't do it above ground because that's easily detected. And they don't want the countries that already have nukes, not saying that they're going to use them, but they would definitely sanction that, those individuals if they did open nuclear testing. So they wind up doing it underground. Well, we do have detectors around the world that can detect. I mean, it's a seismic event, but they can tell that it's not a normal geologic seismic event. It is a nuclear testing seismic event. You're not going to have as much, you're definitely not going to have the nuclear fallout. Depending on how far under the ground, depending on how much shielding that they created for this specific test site, so on and so forth, you're not necessarily going to have any issues. Although, if you don't do it properly, you could wind up affecting your groundwater, and it could, leach up into the upper surface. You can wind up ruining your farmland and things like that. But usually it's far enough underground. They've got the shielding and everything, so they don't have to worry about it. Now, the fourth one is one that I think it actually has been done. At least partially, because you get Bikini Atoll, where they did some nuclear testing, and so some of it would have been underwater. But the ecological disaster, I mean, you think about, how much damage ecologically is done from a ground burst or even an air burst. Imagine underwater, all that aquatic life dead. So, yes, the Bikini Atoll tests and everything like that, that was pretty much it. Most countries know that if you do anything underwater, you're going to wind up screwing yourself up worse, because you kill off the fish, and a lot of countries rely on the fishing industry. Okay, now, why was these weapons even being used in the first place? Well, we're going to come back here, Lost Book of Enki. Now, the Anunnaki, they were preparing to leave. Okay, one of the things that that has been calculated. I'm not going to play the video, but I am going to put a link in the description for a video by the Ancient Astronaut Archive. It's called Evil Wind. He goes a lot more in depth. But the calculations have been done, and you can look at this as either a sign or you can look at it as a coincidence. But this would have actually happened in 2024 BCE. And when we look at what's going on today, I mean, right now, over there in Israel, and what next year is. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, so, like I said, the Anunnaki, they were getting ready, they weren't, it's not like they were going to be packing up the next day and leaving, but they were making preparations. And the command was going to be in the process of being transferred. Now, the way that the Anunnaki did command, who was going to be in command, was based upon the age. Okay, so I'm here in the United States. I'm going to use the commander of, our nation, the president. The president has a 4-year term. And then if he's lucky enough, or if he's done a good enough job, the people love him enough, he can have a second 4-year term. So 8 years total. That's how long he can rule. Okay. With the Anunnaki, they ruled based upon the age. So most of the time during the story, the Anunnaki story, it is the age of Taurus, the bull, which is the age of Enlil. Enlil is the commander. But the age of Aries was dawning. Okay. I'm gonna get into that here in a minute, but first of all, we're gonna come here. Okay, it says against for Marduk. Okay, this is Enki talking. Okay, it says, against Marduk, my firstborn, did the two sons destruction direct. Vengeance was in their hearts. Ascendancy is not Marduk's to grasp, Enlil's firstborn shouted. With weapons I shall oppose him, Ninurta said. of people he raised an army. Babil, this is Babylon, as Earth's navel to declare, Nergal, and Marduk's brothers so shouted. Okay, Earth's navel. This is what is known as Nibruki, the bond heaven Earth. Marduk was wanting to create, well, for this, we're going to come over here. This is called Enmakar and the Lord of Arata. This is the story of the Tower of Babel. Marduk ordered the creation of the Tower of Babel. Okay, this was either some sort of a communications tower. The whole idea of rising to the heavens, not necessarily in actual height. Because you got to think, some of the skyscrapers that we have today, the very tops of them reach the bottom layer of the clouds. So, and we haven't had a god sit there and say, oh, hell no, and freaking strike it down. That, is what, supposedly happened with the Tower of Babel. That's not what happened. It wasn't necessarily a high thing. There was something else to it. So, it was either a communications tower, a new Nibruki, new way to communicate with Nibiru. Okay. There are some that believe, well, first of all, they think, and this is the historians and the archaeologists and the Assyriologists, they think that the Tower of Babel was actually inspired by the ziggurats that were being built. Okay, a ziggurat is just another form of a pyramid. It's just a flat-topped pyramid. In fact, there's one completely intact during the Gulf conflict. It was made sure that it was secured. The United States, they went in and they made sure that that cultural artifact was intact. But there are some individuals out there. I'm declared a nutcase because of some of the things that I believe. But there are some others out there that think that that ziggurat at the bottom of it houses a Stargate. Yeah. There's no way of knowing, because that it has been, that site has been secured by military and not anybody can really get into it. So yeah, is there a Stargate there? I mean, truthfully, if that's what the Tower of Babylon was, if it was a Stargate, that would have given Marduk a great advantage, because he would have been able to go anywhere. But from everything that I've done, all the research that I've done, all the texts and all the things that other people have done, I have not seen any evidence whatsoever that they had wormhole Stargate technology. So I don't see that that's what the Tower of Babel was. No, what I think it was is it was a launch gantry. Okay, so he didn't have to rely on the spaceport, which that was one of the targets. The spaceport in the Sinai Peninsula and the place of the celestial chariots, basically the hangar where they stored their ships when they weren't being used, in Baalbek, Lebanon. Those were the two main targets. Those were the two things that were supposed to be denied to Marduk. Okay, so yeah, this will be in the description. You can read this if you so desire. Okay, so we'll come back here. Okay, it says, For the second time, the people have raised his heavenly image. This is talking about Marduk. Why does opposing continue? Have all the instruments been checked? Did not the era of Marduk in the heavens arrive? Nagashita, my very son, other signs in heaven cited. His heart I knew, Marduk's injustice to him could not forgive. Okay, like I said, the age. This is how they determine who is going to be in command. The age of Taurus was leaving. The age of Aries was dawning. Now, I'm going to show my age here. For those of us that remember the song, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Yeah. Okay, so when it comes to determining the age, when we go to Google, it says, according to various astrologers' calculations. Now, first thing that we got to point out, the signs that are used to determine the age are astronomical. They are the stars, the planets, the constellations. But it is used in astrology. This is how we know the age. This is where we get into the zodiac, the 12 houses. Although, there could be a 13th. But the 12 houses of the zodiac. Okay? And what the age is it's when Sol, our sun, appears to be in a particular constellation. Now, I've talked about the precession of the equinox. This is the wobble of the earth, and it takes approximately 26,000 years to complete. It's within those 26,000 years, it's divided up into 12. So, I mean, yes, it has to do with the earth, and it has to do with the sun. But when the sun appears to be in a specific constellation, that's when it is in that age. But it's the dawning. That's when it's difficult to determine. Sure, if it's in the middle of the age, you can tell for sure. But because there's no actual delimiting line or anything like that, you can't tell when the sun actually crosses. So, okay, it says, according to various astrologers' calculations, approximate dates for entering the age of Aquarius range from 1447 CE, which is already passed. Now, the interesting thing about that date range, in the 1400s, according to A.R. Borden, roughly in the 1400s, is when Anu stepped down as king of Nibiru, and Nanar Sen, aka Allah, assumed the throne of Nibiru. So that could be the beginning of the age. But then we come all the way down here and it says from 1447 CE to 3597 CE. That's a long ways away. That's even longer than when Nibiru is actually calculated to come back, according to Zechariah Sitchin, which is in 2900 CE. Okay, so it says astrologers do not agree on when the Aquarian age will start, or even if it has already started. Okay, so are we in the age of Aquarius now? Astrologers argue about the age of when the age of Pisces ends. See, they don't even know if Pisces has ended. Now, I do have to point out something. A lot of people believe that the age of Pisces was the age of Jesus. Not really. I mean, it may have gotten into, but it was more than likely the age of Aquarius, which is before Pisces. or not Aquarius, excuse me. Yeah. Well, anyway, Pisces was usually, it was more than likely nothing. Aquarius is after Pisces, not before. Was more than likely no commander, nothing. I mean, depending on how long the age actually is, because they're not all equal. This is one of the things that was a big problem with when it came to determining commander and everything like that. The age of Taurus was actually quite long, but the age of Aries was actually quite small. But it really didn't matter because, like I said, the Anunnaki were leaving, so they didn't really care who was in command at that point. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the age of Pisces ends. The calculated launch of the age of Aquarius should be in the 22nd century. Okay, around 2160. And yet, 2021 seven-planet stellium, which was a conjunction that happened back in 2021, Aquarius, stellium in Aquarius led other theorists to believe that we've already arrived. So there are some that say that we are already in the age of Aquarius. It's possible, but there's no real way to know until the sun is like right smack dab in the middle, or at least further into the constellation of Aquarius, which probably wouldn't see that in our lifetime. Okay, so they were, like we have problems determining, when the age is, they were having problems determining when the age was. Okay. So this is where they're coming down and they're saying the place of the celestial chariots. Okay, it says Marduk has all entreaties put aside by the signs of heaven. His supremacy he claims. Okay, again, this goes back into the age. Okay, it says only with weapons will Marduk be stopped. Ninurta and Lil's firstborn shouted. Utu, about protecting the place of the celestial chariots, was concerned. In Marduk's hands it must not fall. Nergal, lord of the lower domain. Now this is believed to be Hades. This would be what would be seen as the devil. This isn't Lucifer, this isn't Satan, but this is essentially the lord of the underworld. Okay, that's who Nergal is. And this is one of Enki's sons. Let the olden weapons of terror for obliteration be used. Okay. Says, in the silence Enlil opened his mouth. Punishment there must be. Like birds without wings, the evildoers shall be. Now, remember in my previous videos, I talked about that Marduk was on a campaign. It wasn't just Marduk, it was Marduk and his son, Nabu. They were on a campaign to create monotheism. To make it to where Marduk was the only god. This was Marduk's 50 names. This is him usurping all the other gods and basically taking their place. It says, Marduk and Nabu, us of heritage, are depriving. That's what this is meaning. He's going around and usurping. So if somebody believes in, a sun god, well, that became Ra. That became Aten. If they believed in Zeus, well, I already showed that Marduk usurped Zeus. He also usurped Yahweh. So this is the main reason why they were mad. Okay, they wanted to deprive them the place of the celestial chariots so that he couldn't leave because he was in exile. But because he was doing this, this is the reason why they really got upset, because now these gods were no longer going to be seen. I mean, they weren't gods. Let's just face that right now, okay? There's no divinity here whatsoever. They are flesh and blood beings. Either they elevated themselves to be gods, or people just seen them as gods. But they would no longer be seen as, the god, because Marduk usurped them, and he may have changed some of their personality traits. So a lot of people would be like, oh, it's Zeus, and he does all this and this and this, and now for some reason he does this. And that was at a point in time when Marduk usurped Zeus. Let the place be scorched to oblivion, Ninurta shouted. The one who scorches, let me be. Now he's talking about the destruction of this place of the celestial chariots, the Sinai spaceport and Baalbek. Excited, Nergal stood up and shouted, let the evildoers' cities also be upheavaled. Wait a minute. The sinning cities let me obliterate, the annihilator of my name thereafter be. Okay, so the two targets were already chosen, the Sinai spaceport and Baalbek, Lebanon, the place of the basically where they stored their ships. But now, Nergal, the lord of the underworld, is sitting there saying that the evildoers' cities. Okay, how do you hurt a god? You hurt a god by hurting his people. His or her. Okay. Okay, so here's Enki. Enki saying, the earthlings by us created must not be harmed. The righteous with the sinners must not be perished. Ninhursag, which this is Ninmah, my creating helpmate was consenting. The matter is between the gods alone to settle. The people must not be harmed. Nergal did not care. Okay. Remember I said there were 7 targets. The 2, the spaceport, and the place of the chariots. Most people have heard about 2 of the other 5 targets. Sodom and Gomorrah. This is what we're taught in church, Sunday school, and whatnot. Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because they were wicked. They were sinners. But that's not what it was. These cities were no different than any other city out there. These weren't cities of iniquity. These weren't cities of just total debauchery all the time. That's the way they make it sound that these were. These were just normal cities. Yeah, they probably had their little bit of crime and a little bit of debauchery and everything like that, just like every city has. So there would have been no difference. The only reason why these cities were destroyed is because they were worshippers of Marduk and Nabu. And now here's the kicker. Most people think that these cities were heathen or pagan. They worship multiple gods, blah, blah, blah. No, these were actually monotheistic cities. They worshipped Marduk, or Nabu, but it was monotheism, not paganism. They weren't wicked. The only sin that they had was that they worshipped Marduk. Okay, so we know about Sodom and Gomorrah, but there was 5 cities, and you're not taught about those in the church. Now, they will give you this verse, and it does talk about the other 5, or the other 3, but they don't say that the other 3 were destroyed. Okay, so it says, and there went out the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah. Okay, those are the 2. Now here's the other 3. The king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela. Now another name for Bela is Zoar, or Zor. Okay. This is a little snippet of an image that was taken from an actual map. Now, this map is on the floor of a church. It's a mosaic. It's in Madaba, Jordan. This is known as the Madaba Mosaic Map. And it's essentially a map of what things were like in biblical times. Now, it's an old map. So, over time, it's understood that maybe there was some damage, some things were lost, so on and so forth. But then you get this situation where, well, first of all, we'll come up here and it says, because looking for Sodom and Gomorrah, says the first most important source for locating Sodom and Gomorrah is the location of Zoar. Okay. The interesting thing is, you get this huge chunk right here, and you got this huge chunk right here. Now, they could have been lost just, because of time. But then they could have also been removed intentionally because those places no longer existed. Because this right here is Zoar. Now, here's where we're going to get into something really interesting. Remember how I told you that these missiles, these nuclear devices, were different from the nuclear devices that we would know? Okay. We're going to come back here to the Lost Book of Enki. Now, this is back on Nibiru. Nibiru's atmosphere was dissipating. And it was because these large volcanoes that were supposed to be bigger than Olympus Mons, which is the largest known volcano in our solar system, and it's on Mars. So these large volcanoes, they weren't producing as much anymore. They weren't erupting like they were supposed to, or they had gone completely dormant. And of course, in my gold video, I said, what the final option that they decided on, and that's what they were going to use. But before they came to that conclusion, it says, let weapons of terror be created, was the other suggestion. Weapons that the ground shake loose, the mountains split asunder. With missiles, the volcanoes to attack, their dormancy to bestir, the belching to increase, the atmosphere to replenish, the breach to make disappear. So these missiles were specifically designed to get a volcano to restart. Now, they were nuclear weapons. They still used fissile material. They still had all the hallmarks of a nuclear device. But they had one added thing that, as far as we know, we don't have the technology for today. And that's, they had the ability to create, or not create, but at least restart a volcano. Okay, so they created these weapons of terror. Now, we fast forward, it's realized that this didn't work. You had the contest of who was actually supposed to rule Nibiru, Anu or Alelu, who was the king at the time. And they wrestled. Alelu lost. Anu won. And Alelu, fearing that there was going to be some sort of retribution, either he was going to be imprisoned or he was going to be executed, went ahead and took a ship. And this ship just happened to be one of the ones they were using to launch these weapons. So we don't know exactly how many devices he had left when he launched from Nibiru. Now, it says that he used them to punch a hole through the hammered bracelet. Now, I don't know if there were dense pockets at the time, because you got to think this was, close to 500,000 years ago. When we look at the asteroid belt now, yeah, there are millions of objects floating around in the asteroid belt, but their distances are so vast that it shouldn't have any problem getting through. We've had various probes, our spacecraft, that have actually gone through the asteroid belt and go out into the outer planets. I mean, you had Cassini, you had Juno, you had New Horizons, you had the Voyagers. They all passed through the asteroid belt, no problem. Now granted, the Anunnaki ships are bigger. But unless, of course, at this point in time, the asteroid belt was more dense, there really would have been no reason to do what Alelu did. He used some of these nuclear weapons. He launched them into the hammered bracelet in order to bust everything up so that he could pass through. Now, he wasn't the only one. When Enki finally made his journey to Earth, he used a water cannon to move boulders out of the way so that they didn't hit them and destroy their ship. But again, like I said, was it more dense back then? And then, of course, if the reason why it's not so dense now, is it because of what they did? We don't know. But by the time he got through the hammered bracelet, what he had left was 7 weapons. And so this is where they were going to go with the 7 targets. Okay, so these things were specifically designed to restart a volcano. Okay, so when we come down here, this is what it says in the Bible. It says, the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, one of the things that we know, and this is done by some, what would be classified as third world countries, for their village to make money, they live close to a volcanic vent. It's not a cone volcano or anything like that. It's what's known as a vent, where magma will bubble up out. And around the rim, because this magma is coming up essentially through layers of sulfur under the ground, it brings this sulfur up with it. And the sulfur accumulates around the rim of this vent, and they go in and this is a very dangerous profession. I mean, seriously, but this is the only way that they can make money. They go in and they collect the sulfur from around the vent, and then they sell it. Okay, so we know that sulfur comes up that way. So remember how I said these weapons were designed to get a volcano to start or restart. Okay. Well, these 5 cities, they are in a fault line region. Now, I don't know if it was intentional, if they actually knew that there was a fault there. And that would have made the most sense. Or if they just dropped them and, they were just hoping for destruction. They didn't realize what was actually going to happen. Because, when we're sitting there saying that burning sulfur rained down, well, there's some people that say that the sulfur came as essentially a meteor shower. If there was sulfur content in meteorites, as they came streaking through the atmosphere, they would have burned up completely. All that sulfur gone. But if you got something that actually causes this fault to open up, create not necessarily a volcano, but it would have caused a shower of the material that was under the ground, under this fault, and some of that would have been sulfur, and it would have shot straight up and then come pretty much straight back down on the region, on that area, on those cities. Now, this region that they think is Sodom and Gomorrah, the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah, you can actually go and pick up pieces of sulfur that are just laying around. Now, sulfur has to have a catalyst before it'll burn. Okay, this is the reason why, when it comes to gunpowder, you have saltpeter and you have charcoal. These are your catalysts to get the sulfur to burn. But these chunks, they're already catalyzed. You can actually go to these places, you can pick up a chunk of the sulfur, take a lighter, and light it. It's already catalyzed. Okay, so the reason why there would have been the rain of sulfur was because these weapons were designed to restart a volcano. They were either targeted intentionally at the fault line, or they didn't know the fault line was there and they were just dropping weapons on these cities. And these specially designed nuclear weapons opened up the ground, sent sulfur up into the atmosphere that came raining back down. Of course, it was on fire. And this is what destroyed the 5 cities. Okay, so where does this come from? Now, Zecharia Sitchin, he doesn't just pull things out of thin air. When he writes about these things, he is interpreting actual ancient texts. And that's one of the things that I like to do, is I like to show those actual ancient texts. And for that, we come here. R.C. Thompson, translator. The Devils and Evil Spirits of Babylonia, London, 1903. That's when it was translated. The 7 Evil Spirits. Okay. I don't know if it has to do with the translation or the transliteration going from cuneiform to either Greek or ancient Hebrew and then to English, or if this is actually how they wrote and how they spoke. But this gives me a headache reading, and it's because of are they, and it gets annoying. It really does. But this talks about, for a lot of mainstream, they would be saying that, okay, yeah, people back then, they were superstitious, they believed in the spirit realm, and they believed in demons and things like that, and that's essentially what this is talking about. But then, this isn't Sitchin. It's the same text, but it says all artifacts, color coding, and writings in bold type with italics inside parentheses are added by editor R. Brown, not the authors, translators, or publishers. Okay, so this is an interpretation, and again, this is not Sitchin. This might have been where Sitchin got it, but this individual, this R. Brown, is sitting there saying, okay, oh God, first of all, I gotta stop. This is not real. Okay, I have looked and looked and looked and looked. I have not found any cylinder seal or any actual carving that this comes from. Okay, honestly, if somebody knows that this is an actual carving, if they know where to find it and that they can point it out to me, I would be appreciated. But that the thing is, this is not real, as far as I can tell. Because seriously, folks, if this was real, this right here is the smoking gun. If this was real. I mean, look at this. You've got the stereotypical bomb and mushroom cloud. The first time I seen it, I my eyes bugged out of my head. I thought for sure that, this was a real thing, and I went on an exhaustive search looking for this, and it's nowhere to be found. But the artist, whoever it was that created this, yeah, they knew what they were doing, because this looks real. Okay? So, yeah. Okay, so, like I said, this is an interpretation by this R. Brown, and he comes through, and it's the same text, but he comes through and he gives us the interpretation of what the text means, and it does talk like these 7 evil spirits or demons are actually missiles. They are weapons. And they are designed to hurt Marduk by destroying his cities. Now, this will be in the description as well as the original text. I'm not going to go through all of it. You can do so if that's something that you're interested in. Yeah. But that's the weapons of terror. And one of the things that I pointed out, the 2024 BCE date, and I'm looking at the world today, and those individuals that are in charge of doing the calculations of what is known as the doomsday clock. This is a figurative clock that shows just how close we are to annihilation through global thermonuclear war. And they've already said that we are as close to midnight as we have ever been right now. And the last time that we were this close, and it wasn't even this close, was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we are like really, really, really close to annihilation. Now, one of the things that it says in the book of Revelation, when it comes to Jerusalem, it says before the return that Jerusalem will lie desolate. That doesn't mean it's destroyed. Desolate just means it's empty of life. No people, no animals. Everybody's gone. And one of the things that it talks about when this evil wind swept through, and this is in the Lamentations by the gods, is that the people were ordered to evacuate. Those that were able to be warned. And so these cities became desolate because they were warned to get out. So, because of what's going on right now in Israel versus Hamas versus Hezbollah, with the potential of Iran pulling the strings, are we getting ready to go into a nuclear conflict? Now, out of all the combatants of those three, well, four, the only one that actually has nuclear weapons is Israel. Now, they have nowhere near as many as what, like, the United States or Russia or even China has, but they do have some. So is it possible that somehow they'll get used? Is history about to repeat itself on its anniversary? We don't know. We hope not. Now, the one thing that I'm seeing is that I'm seeing that a war of men versus men is coming. We're already in the start of it. And the way that I feel is it's going to be highly destructive, but it's not going to last very long. We're not looking at years. We're looking at months. Highly destructive. Now, there are some that say, well, this is World War III. Okay, that is a possibility. You know, I've heard that the Axis powers, the Axis of evil, has already formed. This is Russia, China, and Iran. It's possible. But I don't know. I don't know if we're going to have a situation like that. I think World War III is going to be a bunch of nations in their own little wars. It's like Russia and Ukraine right now. You got Israel and, well, some say it's the Palestinians, but it's not. It's not the Palestinians. Hamas is not. They don't speak for Palestine. They're their own little group. And in fact, it's been pointed out that they are actually taking a page from ISIS's book. Some of the flags that they're flying, they are actual ISIS flags. So this is essentially a reincarnation of ISIS. They are not the Palestinian people. But then you got others that say that this is a proxy war between Israel and Iran. And also the United States. Hopefully, we're not going into a reliving of what happened in the past, even though it has been prophesied. I'm the Anunnaki theorist. Enjoy.